Good morning and welcome to today's full council meeting. Particular welcome to members of the public joining and watching online. I would like to start today's meeting by announcing the signing of a letter of intent with the city of Nikopol in Ukraine. Council will recall that in March of 22, following the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, this council committed to twinning, and I'm very pleased that through the hard efforts of, in particular, Councillor Carr and also Bailey, we have reached a level where we have been able to sign a letter of intent to start a due diligence process. The Provost Subcommittee in February will be asked to consider a much more detailed set of conditions around the process for that, but this starts that process, and we're very pleased to have such willing partners who are also very grateful to have the support here in Scotland and the UK from partners over here. I would also like to advise members that there will be a 1 hour lunch break today. I'm not committing to completing business before lunch, I'm afraid. So there will be a 1 hour lunch break. And we will take comfort breaks probably halfway through the morning, and should the afternoon extend on, probably halfway through the afternoon as well. I'd like to ask the clerk to confirm any apologies and take a roll call of those joining online.
Thank you, Provost. Good morning, everyone. I have no formal apologies that have been submitted. I'm going to ask members who are online to confirm that they're present. Councillor Kogali.
I'm present.
Councillor James.
Morning, Scott. Present.
And Councillor Reid.
Yes, good morning. Present.
Thank you. I'm not aware of any other members who are online, and all other members are in the chambers, Provost. Thanks.
Thank you. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in respect of items on today's agenda? Councillor Angus Forbes.
Thanks, Provost. Like the last time we discussed this, Morris Leslie Group are a customer of mine. I'll therefore declare a financial interest and leave the room for the duration of that discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Deputy Provost Parrott.
Declaration is non-financial interest in paper 8. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Councillor Duff.
Thank you. Just for transparency, I want to declare that the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party rent their premises from Morris Leslie out at Perth Airport, but it's not an interest that will affect our involvement today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Are there any other declarations of interest? No, thank you. Item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting. Are members content to agree the minute of the meeting of the 4th of October 2023? Agreed, thank you. Members, item 4.1 is Boys Need Bins motion by Councillor Duff and Councillor Shires. I'd like to invite Councillor Duff to move the motion.
Thank you, Provost. Embarrassed, stressed and isolated. 3 words used by one man who had incontinence issues as a result of prostate cancer to describe how he felt every single day when faced with the problems of disposing of his sanitary waste. And 3 of the reasons why Prostate Cancer UK is leading on the Boys Need Bins campaign. Prostate cancer is the most common cause of cancer in men, and 1 in 8 of us, possibly 4 or 5 of the men in this chamber, will be diagnosed with it during our lifetime. This rises to 1 in 4 for black males. Statistics show that in the UK, 1 in 25 men aged over 40 experience some form of urinary incontinence, and 1 in 20 men aged 60 or over will suffer bowel incontinence. For these men, a trip out of the house can be a major source of embarrassment, stress and anxiety, as currently their sanitary needs are not being met. Usually, there is no sanitary bin in male toilets, and the items they use, such as incontinence pads, stoma, pouches, and colostomy bags, can't be flushed away. This results in some men having to suffer the indignity of bagging their sanitary waste in the cubicle and having to dispose of it in a street bin or carry it home. Yesterday, following the article on this motion which appeared in the Courier, I had an email from a lady in Fife. Her late husband had prostate cancer, and she told me that, like many other men in his condition, he found it extremely embarrassing to go into a supermarket toilet to change and then to have to carry his incontinence pad out of the shop in a bag as discreetly as possible and take it back to the car to dispose of it later at home. Clearly, this is not only a public health and hygiene issue, but something which causes both physical and mental harm to those men who suffer incontinence and have inadequate facilities to dispose of these items appropriately. It leads to nearly 50% of men isolating themselves and not leaving home as often as they would otherwise wish to, or to many men continuing to wear soiled or wet pads for longer than they should do, causing rashes, infections, and other health issues. I hope that the discussion today will help to raise awareness of this issue, not only within this chamber and within Perth and Kinross Council, but that other Perth and Kinross facilities and businesses will also rise to the challenge and support Prostate Cancer UK's Boys Need Bins campaign. Football clubs and workplaces, restaurants and cafes, cinemas and theatres, shopping centres and supermarkets. Our motion today seeks your approval for this council to review and consider the provision of sanitary bins within our toilet facilities, normally accessed by adults, male and female, who have these needs in our public and council buildings. To encourage other providers of public workplace toilets to provide male sanitary bins, and especially within that, I hope that we can look at help we can give to those facilities within our comfort scheme. And finally, to support Prostate Cancer's Boys Need Bins campaign throughout Perth and Kinross in every way we can as a local authority. By supporting these recommendations today, we can improve the lives of all those who suffer from incontinence and give them the dignified access they need and deserve to these essential facilities. I commend this motion to the Chamber. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Shine, second, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Provost. Councillor Duff has set out quite clearly the terms of our motion today, and I'd just like to thank the residents of Blairgowrie and Glens who raised this important UK-wide campaign with us, and the quite emotional discussions that followed on about people feeling that their lives had been limited by the effects of their prostate cancer. In Scotland, I would applaud the work that's been done by Prostate Scotland to raise this issue, and I hope that this motion will gather the cross-party support today across this chamber that it has elsewhere across the UK, and that we can take a lead and encourage others, businesses, cafes, etc., to follow on. Traditionally, men, I look at the males in this chamber, perhaps don't always like to talk about personal things, and I hope today that we might just make it okay to have these conversations and just try and break down some of that stigma that affects some of the 400,000 men across this country. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shires. Do any members wish to comment on the motion? Councillor McEwen, you have an amendment.
Yes, thank you, Provost. It's not to amend the brilliant motion that has been brought forward by Councillor Duff and Councillor Shires. It's to additionally add this extra point to the agenda, which is now up on the screens. Prostate Scotland run workplace toolkits and workplace information, and I think this is a brilliant opportunity to highlight prostate issues and prostate cancer, and to ensure that, as has been said by speakers, men are often hide their health issues under a bushel and don't come forward later, and when treatment is more difficult, where if they present earlier, then it is more likely that they were going to be able to have solutions to the issues that they have that are more successful for a longer and happier life. I don't want to take up too much time because I fully support the motion that's come forward, but as a healthcare professional, I can't resist the opportunity to highlight the health promotion that comes with these topics, to come forward and highlight what needs to be done to prevent this. Prostate Cancer UK, if you go to their website, they have a brilliant risk checker that you can go through, answering simple questions that then advises you to go see your GP. Prostate Scotland have a similar type thing. They have a booklet that goes through all the different symptoms, etiologies, what to look out for, and when to present yourself. It also has information for NHS Tayside. The Drummer Health Centre here in Perth is the locus for NHS Tayside's urinary incontinence services and support, and that's all on that website as well. And I heard in the news this morning that the Cancer Research UK are now running a blood and urine campaign. This is where urinals in men's toilets will contain information to help support that. If you even once see blood within your urine, then you should contact a doctor to get that investigated. I just want to take the opportunity of this motion to highlight these important issues because it's a great motion. Thank you. And I'd just like the mover to incorporate it into their motion rather than anything more complex.
Thank you very much. Councillor John Duff.
Thank you, Provost. I welcome these additional comments from Councillor McEwen. I think everything that's been said this morning is correct. There's a massive need for men to be more aware of prostate cancer and a number of other health issues, and I'm certainly happy to incorporate these additional recommendation into the motion. Thank you. I'm sure Caroline, Councillor Shires will confirm. Thank you.
Councillor Shires has indicated that she's happy to incorporate. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Provost, and thanks to Councillors Duff and Shires for bringing forward the motion today. It was an issue that I was only kind of tangentially aware of, but in seeing the motion, I signed up to the campaign, and I was prepared to second Councillor Tom McEwen's amendment had that been necessary. But I'm really pleased that it's been accepted by the mover and seconder of the motion. Prostate disease and prostate cancer are not often spoken about, even though prostate disease affects nearly 1 in 2 men over the age of 50 at some time in their life. 1 in 10 men in Scotland may develop prostate cancer, and the latest NHS projections suggest that incidence is likely to increase by 35% in the next period until 2027. And we know that the earlier prostate disease is diagnosed and treated, the better the chances of that treatment being successful. And with over 75% of people of working age being in employment, the workplace is an important route through to distributing information and accessing treatment. And I'm very happy to support the amendment and the motion. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barrett. I'm not seeing any other requests to comment, so I'll just come to Councillor John Duff to summarise if he wishes.
I think we've said everything that needs to be said. I'm glad that we have the support across the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillors Duff and Shires, for bringing forward this important motion, and to Councillors McEwen and Barrett for their support and suggested additional wording. Members, are we happy to agree the motion? Thank you very much, members. Members, item 5 is an application for planning permission, and David Littlejohn, the Strategic Lead for Economy Development and Planning, is going to introduce the report.
Thank you, Provost, and good morning, councillors.
At its meeting on 17th of August 2022, the Council considered this application and was minded to grant planning permission subject to the conclusion of a Section 75 legal agreement relating to specific planning obligations. In the intervening period, National Planning Framework 4 was adopted and now forms part of the development plan. Therefore, this application requires to be reconsidered by the Council as planning authority to ensure conformity with NPF 4. This is the sole reason this application is being reconsidered today. Therefore, the purpose of the report is to inform the Council of new considerations arising from NPF 4. Previously, the officer's recommendation was that the application should be granted. Following the adoption of NPF 4, that remains the officer's recommendation. To recap, the application is for planning permission in principle, and all design and layout details remain to be confirmed through the recommended conditions and for further consideration when approval of matters specified in conditions or reserved matters applications are submitted in due course. As I indicated, the Council previously resolved to grant planning permission subject to the conclusion of a legal agreement to see the land associated with the new proposed park and choose facility transferred to Perth and Kinross Council. That agreement is almost concluded. The previously agreed conditions associated to the minded to grant decision have been updated to reflect the revised phasing arrangements which have been discussed with the applicant over the past year. Thank you, Provost, and I'm joined by Christian Smith, who's a Service Manager for Development Management, and between us we will be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions just coming in. Just bear with me 1 second. Apologies, members. We have in the last few minutes received a letter which I think members will wish to see in the consideration of this item. Although it is not a material consideration, I imagine members who were present for the discussion last August will want to see this. It's from the developer. It is going to be circulated around members, and I think that we'll give you a few minutes just to read the letter, and then I'll come to questions. So we will take a few minutes recess briefly. Okay, members, we're going to put it on the screen as well. I think it's important that we have as much information as possible. So although it has come in the last 10 minutes, for any members that haven't got their Surface Pros with them, it is visible on the screen now, and we're going to zoom that into the content if we can. Okay, thank you. David, do you want to just cover off the contents of the letter before I come to questions?
The members will recall that at the meeting last year, there was considerable discussion about the provision of a footpath along the main road that's not formally part of the application site, but clearly heard some deputations from the community, and members expressed some concern about potential road traffic matters, and agreed, and the applicant agreed informally to make or consider how that footpath could be provided. But as the Provost has quite rightly stated, it doesn't form part of the application site, nor is it formally a planning obligation. So that the letter that's been now received is effectively from the applicant agreeing that there is a wider community benefit to be offered voluntarily, and therefore to enter into some discussions with officers to secure those improvements, and if necessary, I think the letter's offering delivering a financial contribution towards the costs of those works. So as was stated earlier, this is a voluntary contribution as part of a community benefit. It's not a direct material consideration, but clearly one that's very welcome.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Littlejohn. Bailey Alistair Bailey with a question.
I'd like to convert the question to a comment in light of the new information received, so I'll wait till the appropriate time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't believe there are any other questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so I will invite someone to move a motion since it's planning. The Leader of the Council has a motion.
Thanks, Provost and members. We will remember we had a good debate and discussion when this plan application came previously in August. And before I go in, I thank and welcome the willingness of the applicant to enter into a community benefit discussion around the footpath, which we
Right, I'll come back.
which we were all anxious that we should take some action, or what action we could to encourage them to do so after listening to the deputations that came and spoke so well for that. So I really welcome that is a possibility moving forward, and encourage our officers to engage with the applicant. So this application was previously considered at the council meeting of the 17th of August 2022, where it was agreed that planning permission should be granted, subject concluding a legal agreement focused on securing a land transfer to enable PKC to deliver a park and choose transport hub. However, the intervening period, as the legal process has been progressing, MPF 4 has been adopted as part of the development plan, and as a result requires to be considered before a decision can be issued. This report undertakes that additional assessment of the proposals against MPF 4 and continues to find that the application should again be agreed to be approved. The delivery of the park and choose, together with a transport museum, tourist accommodation and other associated facilities, is considered to be an important step in creating opportunity for Perth and Kinross to make the best of its assets and opportunity for positive growth. So I'm happy to move this report. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Drysdale, you wish to second the report?
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to first of all thank Mr. Littlejohn for his update, and also thank the applicant for the statement that has been provided this morning, which is very welcome and encouraging. This development, once hopefully eventually fully approved, will be an important part of the economic development of Perth and Kinross. And I have no hesitation in seconding the motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Bailey with a comment.
Thank you, Provost. I'd also like to thank the developers for giving us this undertaking. It's very good news that there will be a contribution towards the path that will take it out with the actual legally required scope. And I think that naturally the questions the community will ask next will be, how much will that contribution be, and how far will that enable the council to build that path that is much needed by those residents, because there's a significant amount of length required there, but we'll wait and see in due course. So yeah, I'm happy to support this and happy to hear that we have this undertaking and hopefully something comes to fruition soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. I'm not seeing any other requests for comments. Therefore, members, are we happy to agree with the report? Thank you. The Deputy Provost is going to take items 6 and 7.
Provost just waiting for Councillor Forbes to come back in because he deferred an interest.
Thank you, Provost. We now move to item 6, the review of the scheme of establishment for community councils, and I would ask Lee Haxton to introduce this paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors. This report sets out the process that has been followed to revise the scheme of establishment for community councils. In short, the scheme sets out the process for establishing, running and supporting community councils in Perth and Kinross. We have provision for 52 community councils across Perth and Kinross, with 44 currently established, and this review is a statutory requirement following the last review in February of 2019. The report that you have is split into 4 main sections. Section 4 sets out the statutory position and the process that we've used to gather feedback from interested parties. Section 5 summarises the changes to the scheme which officers have proposed. Section 6 confirms that we have broad support for the proposed changes and also provides details of additional changes resulting from the feedback from community councils, which officers feel are also worthy of inclusion. Section 4, and the final section, the appendix, includes the revised scheme of establishment and associated documentation, which includes a template constitution, standing orders and code of conduct for community councils. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a first question from Bailey.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I welcome this report. It's good to keep these things fresh in order to enable our community councils to keep doing the good work they do. The feedback that I passed on from Errol Community Council during this process, I can't see it reflected in the report, so I'll ask it as a question instead. So Errol Community Council felt it was very strange last time around that they, in the election year, they had to dissolve and then reappoint their office bearers in the October. Now that the AGMs have to be in October, then the elections happened and they were again dissolved and had to reappoint their office bearers again in November. Is there any possibility that that final AGM we could remove the need for them to dissolve and reappoint officers for basically what turned out to be a 3 or 4 week period? That was the request from Errol Community Council. Thank you.
Mr. Haxton.
Yeah, my understanding, I need to completely double check that to be assured, and I can send Bailey a note to confirm, but my understanding is that is already in the scheme, that there is no requirement in the year of an election for the AGM office bearers to be appointed, given that they would only be appointed for a very, very short period. I shall double check that, and if it's not the case, then that can be changed.
Thank you for that reassurance. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart, Colin.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. It had caused a particular point of confusion with one of my community councils. So I'm glad to see that in 7.7 of the scheme, Roman numeral 2, wording there has been tidied up, but I think there's still an issue about what it says is the number of co-opted members may not exceed a third of the maximum community council membership and should be rounded up to the nearest figure. I'm just not entirely clear what should be rounded up to the nearest figure, and I wonder if that could be clarified as well, please.
If it's okay with the Councillor Chair, I'll consult with the Community Council Liaison Officer and confirm that with you separately, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now online we have Councillor Ian James. Ian.
Thanks, Deputy Provost, and thanks for the report, Lee. A quick one. On page 99 of our papers, 21 of your report, Strathay, Bertha Park is a growing area and a new area, which at the moment comes under Luncarty, Redgaunt and Manidi. They have aspirations to actually, once the park is fully built, they have aspirations to bring perhaps their own community council. Is there a method where they can actually form and be added to this, please?
Yes, they can, and we've had 2 or 3 conversations with residents of Bertha Park presenting what those options would be, and their first preference was to work in the existing arrangements and have nominated community council members from their community, but that doesn't disqualify them in future if they wish to form their own community council. There's a process that we can guide them through to help them do that.
Thank you. I see no further questions, so I'll ask the Leader of the Council, Councillor Lane, to move the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Councillors, this report summarises the process that officers have followed in reviewing the scheme of establishment for community councils in Perth and Kinross. Community councils play a key role in representing the views of local communities and acting on local issues and priorities, and the scheme is an important reference point in helping community councils to run effectively and efficiently. The scheme covers a number of aspects of community council business, including roles, responsibilities, memberships, elections and resources. This revised version makes some changes which have been subject to open consultation with us as elected members and ex-officio members of community councils, community council members themselves and the wider public. We are being asked to formally adopt this revised scheme of establishment, agree that it be implemented from the 1st of January 2024 and agree that the next review will take place in 2028. I'd like to thank the officers who are involved within the Community Council liaison team, who are always available to help the many questions that come their way. And I want to take that chance to thank for a lot of unseen work that they do in the background. And I'm happy to move the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Drysdale to second the report? Eric.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Yeah, I'm more than happy to second this, and I would just like to take this opportunity very briefly just to encourage anyone listening to this debate today and interested in public service on community councils to put themselves forward if there is a community council in their area. But more importantly, as far as I'm concerned, there are many areas in my own ward in Perth city centre that are not covered by community councils, and if anyone feels able and willing to take on the task of setting up a new community council in any of the areas that are not covered, then please, I would encourage you to do so. Happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there? Yes, there are. Councillor Robertson, William, comment.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I think it's good that this paper's come before us today and rationalises a number of things that weren't quite correct with the setting up of community councils. I think it's important that we all recognise the important work that community councils do within our wards. And where they work well, they make a huge difference to the life of the communities they represent. So I think we should all be thankful for the people who give up their time and their knowledge to help promote their own communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carr, Stevie.
Thank you. Representing a ward that has 5 community councils within it, I welcome this report. Community councils are at the heart of the communities they serve and often a critical link between communities and council. Having that local knowledge is beneficial for both local issues and providing local services, ensuring that communities have a voice.
Thank you. Councillor Duff, John.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Yeah, as one of the 3 councillors in the Highland Ward, and I think we possibly have the most with 8 community councils in our area, I think it is important to take this opportunity just to recognise the very valuable work that community councils do within our wards. They obviously give up a lot of their time and energies to support the work on behalf of the communities, and I think it's important today that we just recognise the fact that they're part of the governance structure, if you like, within their local communities, and the work they do is immensely valuable, and I'm thankful for them. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no requests for further comment. Can we agree the report? Thank you. We now move to item 7, the review of parliamentary constituency polling districts and polling places. And can I ask Scott Walker to introduce this report? Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. The Electoral Administration Act 2006 requires us to review the UK parliamentary polling districts and polling places at least once every 4 years. The latest review must take place between the 1st of October 2023 and the 31st of January 2025. Consideration and approval of this report ensures that we have met our statutory requirements. The aim of the review is to ensure that every elector in Perth and Kinross has such reasonable facilities for voting as are practicable, and to ensure that as far as possible, the accessibility needs of persons with a disability have been considered within designated polling places. The statutory consultation period ran from the 5th of October to the 16th of November 2023. And during this period, any registered elector and any of the parties listed in paragraph 5.1 were able to make comment on the proposals. The full list of polling places and districts are set out in Appendix 1, and changes are summarised in Section 5. Alongside the proposals in Section 5 are any comments or representations received during the consultation. No representations were received in relation to the original officer proposals. Indeed, support for our proposals was received from the organisations listed at paragraph 5.16. There was one representation received relating to polling district PCV, which is located within Riverside Church. There are no issues with this venue, and therefore the report proposes no change to this polling place. Subject to approval of this paper, Appendix 1 would come into effect for any by-elections prior to the next dissolution of the UK Parliament. On full dissolution of the UK Parliament, the new UK constituencies of Angus and Perthshire Glens, Perth and Kinrossshire, and Stirling and Strathallan come into effect. The impact of these changes on our polling districts and places are set out in Appendix 2 and summarised in Section 6. We're seeking approval of the polling districts and places in Appendix 1 that will come into immediate effect, and we're also seeking approval of the polling districts and places in Appendix 2 that will come into effect on the full dissolution of the UK Parliament. Colleagues and I are happy to take questions, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Christine Grant and Pam Rogalski for all the work they've done in pulling this report together. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much. And first question from Councillor James. Ian.
Thanks, Deputy Provost, and thanks, Scott. My question is on page 131 or 131 of our papers. And the second item down is Perth and North Perthshire, Ward 6, and then refers to Amelree, which is in Ward 5. So the question is, would and one electorate as published, would we have to open legally Amalree Hall for one voter? Could we not just go and tap on their door and give them their voting forms? Or the other part of that is, should that be Oak Hill and South Perthshire ward rather than Perth and Perthshire North? Because you've got Amalree on the previous page, if that kind of makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Can Mr. Walker address that?
So I'll start and perhaps Christine can jump in. First question is we do have to have a polling district for that one voter. That's the law. Christine, are you able to jump in on the second part of that question?
Hiya, yeah, Councillor James. So Amalree Hall has two registers, one which is PCT Amalree Hall, which has 102 electors. So we would open a polling station, obviously, for that number of electors. The one PLM with the one elector, just with the boundaries it falls within, it has to be a register of its own. So the polling station would always be open because you've got 102 electors in the other register anyway. So it would never just be a polling station for one elector. And with regards to which constituency it falls into, it is the Perth and North Perthshire it falls into.
Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. No problem.
Thank you. Bailey Ahern, Chris.
Thank you very much. My question is on paragraph 515 with regards to Ward 12 and polling station PCV. And I noticed in your comments you said there, but you take into consideration disabilities. The request was, and you say there are no issues with the current venue, and I agree with that. The issue is with the elderly in that ward in trying to get to a polling station which is on the edge of the ward and not one that's in the middle. And I wonder whether the elderly are taken into consideration as well as those with disabilities.
Scott.
Again, thank you for the question. I believe they are, but again, Christine, have you got the full list of groups that we engage with?
Hi, no, sorry, I've not got the full list in front of me, but we did engage with local disability groups, etc., and we've had no feedback from any of them. With regards to previous elections, we've never had any feedback from anyone declaring that they've had any issues voting at this polling station. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. I'm just afraid then it's the members of the public have not complained to the right place then. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson, Stewart.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. First of all, can I thank Christine Grant and Pam Rogalski in particular for the work they do, and I think it's sometimes unrecognised, in particular for the various community councils, but also they have their election responsibilities. I see Councillor James got in before me on the question of Amalree and the presence of Strathern at that polling station. I will say it's never been an area where we've got involved in kind of a significant campaigning at election time. But a more general question. Polling districts are important as building blocks, not just for Westminster and Scottish Parliament election boundaries, but also for ward boundaries. Could I ask Scott Walker, do we have any indication as to when the next review of local government boundaries is likely to be in Scotland? There was one just before the 2017 election, and that's when we went from 41 to 41, 40 councils. Prior to that, I think it'd been 10 years previously. So we're likely to see a change in boundaries during a review during the course of this term, or will be into the next term.
Councillor Donaldson, I'm not aware of a review, but I'm happy to do a little bit of research to look into that and circulate that around the elected members to a briefing note.
Thank you. I think it would be of interest to all councillors here. Grateful.
Thank you. And now Councillor Allen. Keith.
Thank you, Vice Convener. It's with regards to the voting movements in Ward 7. I can understand that the people putting this report together probably had a nightmare with the Ward 7 Strathallan and being linked to Stirling, and also 2 parts of our ward linked to Perth. I'm just wondering if there's any particular reason why some of the people are being expected to move polling stations from Auchterarder to Dunning, and others are okay to stay in Auchterarder, although it's for a different ward. Is that something that's easily answered? Thank you.
So I'll perhaps start the answer, and maybe Christine can jump in as well. We work with the electoral registration officer in terms of where the boundaries lie. We try to come up with the best solution for voters. I mean, a multi-constituency ward does cause us issues because it can lead to voter confusion, etc., which is why we try to minimise it as far as possible. But Eaton Hall is clearly the biggest facility we've got in that area, which is why it's a sacrifice we're having to make. We're therefore trying to move people to within the districts, the constituencies that they are going to actually vote in. Christine, is there anything you want to add to that?
Sorry, apologies, I had problems getting off mute. So what happened when the new boundaries came out, what the Boundary Commission had done was the new boundaries had split some of the current polling districts. So if we were to keep people voting where they currently are, it would be numerous registers at one polling place with 2 different constituencies. So the areas that we are having to move, it is very minimal numbers of electors, if any, that are being moved to potentially a different polling place. It was just the more practical solution to this than making Eaton Hall, for example, a really complex polling station for staff and for voters.
Thank you for that. I don't disagree with the comments that have been made. It's just the fact that Eaton Hall will be used for both polling stations, and only a few have been moved to Dunning. I was just wondering if there was any particular reasoning behind those that have been moved and those that hadn't.
Christine, do you want to add further comment?
It would just mean that at the moment there's obviously 4 registers there. We would potentially have 5 or 6 different registers there. I can give you a more sort of detailed breakdown and send that on to you separately if you wish. It was just the more practical solution was to do it the way that we're proposing.
Thank you. I'm happy to take that offline. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no further questions, so can I ask our council leader, Councillor Lane, to move the reports? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. This is one paper today that every elected member in here will be an expert on. We've all gone and put boards outside and walked in and hung about outside, so I'm sure every one of us is an expert, not just for local government elections, but many others. So, councillors, Approval of this report today ensures that we comply with our statutory duty to undertake a review of UK parliamentary polling districts and polling places by the 31st of January 2025. The changes we are asked to approve today are minimal. This is borne out by the fact that there have been no representations on the officer proposals. They simply reflect changes in the availability of buildings, new information from our communities, and the merger of one polling district. I particularly welcome the proposal to reinstate a polling place within the Fairfield area of Perth City. Working with partners in the local Kingdom Housing Association, we are able to bring back a polling place in Fairfield after a gap of over 6 years. The timing of this review means that we're being asked to approve two things. Firstly, changes to our polling places and districts that will take immediate effect and would be in place should there be a by-election. And secondly, the polling places and districts that will come into existence in the next year or so when the UK Parliament is dissolved for a UK general election. I'd like to thank again the work by Christine Grant, Scott Walker and all their team in providing us with this information and looking into all the polling places that we currently use. So happy to move the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will formally second this report. Thank you. Comments, Councillor Rebecca John.
Thanks very much, Deputy Provost. Apologies for my premature putting my comment in the box earlier. I was pleased to see a polling station back in Fairfield locally, as the leader alludes to, and I would quite like to thank Pam and Christine and actually Scott for not only their work on this, but the positive way that you worked with Councillor Massey and I when we made representations as well, and it was before Councillor Leishman was elected, to be fair, as well. But we're delighted to see it back here. I think it's really important. Thanks to Kingdom Housing Association for working really positive with us. I know that Councillor Massey and I were disappointed not to see any community space retained when the community centre was knocked down and replaced by flats, but nonetheless, I think the fact that we're at least able to vote locally in Fairfield now is important. And the last thing I just want to say, of course, that we were remiss, having thanked Kingdom and our officers, not to thank the staff in Fuse Road for allowing us to, the residents of Wells Hill, to continually vote there as well. I think that's also important. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Are there any further comments? I see none. Can we agree this report? Thank you. I will now hand back to the Provost for item 8 and thereafter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. Members, we now move on to item 8, Tay Cities Regional Deal Joint Committee proposed changes to membership, and Alison Seggy, the Economic Development Manager, People Partnerships and Funding, is going to introduce the report.
Morning. Thank you, Provost. I would like to firstly apologise for an inaccuracy within the report at paragraph 4.3, where it states the current council elected representatives on the Tay Cities Region Deal Joint Committee as Councillors Leing, Duff and McCall. It should read Councillors Leing, Duff and Drysdale. This is a short, essentially procedural report which seeks agreement to allocate the vacant voting membership on the Tay Cities Region Joint Committee to the Tayside and Central Scotland Transport Partnership, known as TACTRAN. The Joint Committee is the decision-making body to implement the deal and its projects and programmes. Currently, the Private Sector Enterprise Forum have 2 seats on the committee, but have indicated they only require 1 going forward. Therefore, the Joint Committee have proposed to allocate the remaining voting seat to TACTRAN, who are currently an active but non-voting member. The other 3 local authorities have already formally approved this change. Currently, Councillor Parrott is the TACTRAN representative. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on the report? Councillors Colin Stewart.
Thank you, Provost. I was just wondering, in terms of the existing body that doesn't require its 2 seats. I think you said it was the Private Sector Enterprise Forum. I was just wondering whether what the constituent groups within the Enterprise Forum are, because I was conscious when the Tay Cities Region Deal Joint Committee was originally set up that there was representation from large enterprises, but there was concern from small and medium and rural enterprises that they were not represented on the Joint Committee.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Stewart. Yes, you're correct. We have changed the membership slightly over the last few years, following some concerns. However, the current Enterprise Forum is representative of a wide range of businesses from all across the geography of the Tay Cities region and represent micro, medium and larger businesses. So we feel it is now pretty representative of businesses across the region.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions. Therefore, I'm going to invite the Leader of the Council to move the report.
Thanks, Provost. This report is really just a piece of housekeeping, I would say. The TRAN representative has been a non-voting member appears at each of the committees meetings anyway. So, Provost, this report seeks agreement to allocate the vacant voting membership on the Tay Cities Region Joint Committee to the Tayside and Central Scotland Transport Partnership, known as TAC-TRAN. The Joint Committee is a decision-making body to implement the deal and its projects and programmes. The change has already been approved by the other partners, and we need to formally agree the change to the committee's terms of reference. The deal and the projects and programmes within the deal represent the most significant investment in the economic development of our area in recent times. We are now in year 4 of deal delivery and good progress is being made, no more so than our own Perth Museum. An update report will come before this committee in the spring of next year, once the next annual performance report has been published. I'm very pleased to move this paper for your approval. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Mr. Deputy Leader to second.
Yes, happy to second, Provost. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there any comments on the paper? If there are no comments, are we happy to agree the paper? Thank you very much. Members will take a 10-minute comfort break at this point and resume at 20 to 12. Good morning again, members. We will now begin item 9, the annual climate action report and action plan update. And Serge Malone, climate change and smart investment manager, will introduce the report. Serge.
Thank you, Provost. This report seeks approval for the climate change annual report and for the action plan for 2024-2025. The report provides an update on progress in delivering Perth and Kinross climate change strategy and action plan. It provides a summary of key achievements, action delivery, challenges and barriers, and overall performance. Appendix A provides further details on progress for each of the 8 themes covered by the plan. It also proposes an updated action plan for 24-25 in Appendix B, and changes in key performance indicators in Appendix C. Teams across the Council have contributed to produce the report and continue to deliver the agreed actions. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Serge. Just going to take a... Okay. If you want to make it now, you can make it now.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Just based on advice on the information, I think on the next paper that's to do with the ADOs, I'll have to declare an interest and leave the meeting.
Thank you very much. Bailey Ahern.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you for your indulgence. Yeah, during discussions during the recess there, I too feel that I'm not going to be able to possibly step out of my bounds as a director. Therefore, I declare an interest in the next paper. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Bailey McLaren with the first question, please.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I'm noting in the paper that agricultural emissions are listed as 28%. The industry is going through a natural transformation change. Herd numbers continue to decline. Computerized technology continues to advance efficiencies of working practice. Grassland management is a continuing focus. Science is also having an input into a broader understanding of improvement of animal health. What level of interaction are officers having with the industry to gain a full understanding of its positive activities? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. We've got different themes, and under the land use theme and the business and industry group theme, there are interactions with the sector, although we would like to develop them further because that needs to be improved and strengthened based on the fact that the level of emissions from that sector. It's worth noting that these emissions were only introduced in the statistics last year, so that's why it's showing a big proportion in the emissions in Perth and Kinross. The type of relationship we have had with the sector are mainly through some estates which have been involved in some of the key initiatives to generate energy. And with some organizations, but I think it should be strengthened and developed, particularly with the NFUs.
Follow up.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's interesting. I would like to offer my assistance in any way that I can too, because I'm wondering if that 28% is possibly even lower, and it may improve the overall report for us. So happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kugali.
Hi, yeah, there's mention in the section about the Climate Change Commission about resignations. Do we know how many resignations have there been? And just to check that those aren't actually relevant to the operation or the goals, or something to do with the actual commission itself, and if they are those being fed into what the long-term plans are?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Kugali. There have been a few resignations from the Commission. I don't have the exact number, but I would say between 4 and 5 have been there. I think some of the reasons for the resignations were mainly due to personal reasons from the commissioners, but also I think the Commission is aware that they have to review the way they operate, and they have at the last meeting they've agreed to relaunch a campaign to recruit new members using an open and transparent and fair process, but also to review the way they work to effectively attract people and keep them motivated and interested to stay in the Commission. So there's a mix of reasons why the membership have people have resigned from the Commission.
Thank you. Bailey.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you for the report. The report's very thorough. I welcome the report. It has a lot of data in it, and my question is actually the motivation of my question is actually to put some of that data into context. We've got lots of figures around kilotons of carbon dioxide emissions and whether they're trending up or down. My question is, in order that we have some kind of reference point, do officers know at all what are the total greenhouse gas emissions arising from the CTLR construction phase? Or maybe if we have those broken down yearly, that would be even better. But the crisp number I'm looking for is the number for the total emissions from the CTLR construction phase. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Bailey. Gillian Ferguson, who is the project manager for the CTLR, has provided some information on the CTLR emissions. I must say as well that in the stats that you've been presented, the construction sector is not shown because it's the way the UK government, the stats, the UK government is presenting the figures. So effectively, the construction sector is split between the different areas you can see on the pie chart. In terms of the CTLR, the contractor of the CTLR has provided some information about what will be the estimated projection at design level, specimen design level, and potentially a construction level. So they have provided that information, so we can communicate this information to all members after the meeting, if it's possible, instead of
Yes, perhaps we can bring that to briefing note. Yeah.
I wonder if those could be shared now, because it will help the debate in this meeting if we're able to put use those numbers to put the numbers in the report into context, please.
I'll provide some figures if you want now. Yeah.
Yes, if you can. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's obviously what was provided by the contractor as based on the estimates they have. In terms of the concept design, it was 97,000 ton of CO2. The contractor is providing tons of CO2 equivalent. So that's the equivalent. At the specimen design level, that was reduced to 84,191. So there was reduction, obviously, if you value engineering there. And at final level, when obviously more value engineering was done, that went down to 45, around, I would say, 50,000 ton of CO2 equivalent, which means that's about half of reduction of estimate of CO2 emissions between the concept design to construction design. And that's split between the different areas of the project, between the materials, construction itself, and the transport. So that's why it's not also visible in the overall statistics.
Thank you. Thank you for bearing with me. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Provost. Page 187, 5.10, it talks about the inclusion of an additional Scope 3 emissions category for staff commuting. I just wonder, has there been any scope of the amount of emissions as a result of staff home working?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. So that's a new area that we've been covering in this report. And we have had a report presented to the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee on the public sector bodies reporting, which was highlighting these new areas covered by the report. These COP3 emissions figures are based on modeling. So the staff traveling has been based on a modeling that we've been used, but also on staff survey. So it's a sample of staff responses. So I will be careful with using these data as a kind of a blank cover, because it's really a sample and needs to be validated by further survey with staff. The issue of carbon emission at home, there's not really a real modeling that we can use. There are some indicators that we can use, but that will need further research. And I cannot really provide a very specific, data for that. But that's part of the work to effectively understand better what we call Scope 3 emissions from the Council. And that's obviously that's what we are working on.
Follow up, Councillor Allen.
Follow up on that, thank you. Yeah, just on the modelling, I noticed in a recent report for York City Council, they've declared that working from home has caused 13% of their emissions, equating to 723 tonnes. Perhaps we can look at benchmarking their modelling and get some information in that. Thank you.
Yeah, we could definitively use any other experience and best practice out there.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Provost. My question's on paragraph 5.7. It's influencing others to take action. It's really just to clarify something. It says the public sector is only directly responsible for less than 3% of emissions. Now, I thought that less than 3% figure was just for Perth and Kinross Council, but this would seem to suggest it's for all public sector organisations. Can we get clarity if it's just Perth and Kinross Council, or if that would also include NHS, police, etc.?
Thank you for your question. Yes, it will include all public bodies in Perth and Kinross. That's the way the stats are organised.
Thank you. Councillor Braun. Thanks, Provost. Looking at page 211 of the report, at the bottom it says we're looking to replace all oil-fired heating systems with non-direct emissions heat source. I'm assuming one of those replacements with air source heat pumps. I'm just wondering, have we looked at, in particular rural areas, looked at the options of biofuels to use in oil-fired heating? I understand that they can actually produce up to 90% less emissions, and the cost of adapting a boiler to take that sort of fuel is approximately £100 just to change the burner, rather than thousands of pounds for heat source pumps.
Thank you for your question. I will have to go back to my colleagues in property dealing with the decarbonisation programme, because they will have to look at different options, and I suspect they will have looked at biofuels, but I can ask them to come back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Provost. Thanks very much for this report. It's a very detailed report, comprehensive report. I have a question regarding in the Appendix A, the KPI table, about 3/4 of the way through there. I notice a number of the targets are either still to be set or method of measure to be identified. Could you clarify when these targets will be set and when that might happen? Thanks.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. So some of the targets have been difficult to set, so that's why they're not populated, and that's why also we are reviewing the KPIs and in Appendix C because we think some of the KPIs it will be very difficult to find a baseline and having a regular target. However, I think it's important, and the Climate Change Board, I think, will look at reviewing the annual report and all the targets and milestones in the next, at the beginning of the year, to make sure that the future annual report is including targets and milestones. The other thing as well is you'll see that we've got a target which are set at Scottish level, in terms of the overall emission and so on. And so the milestones between now and the target for 2045 or 2030 per year. So this milestone per year are usually set linearly. So it's a kind of this is how much we have to reduce by within 15 years, and we split that between by 15 or for each year, and that's really the only way we can do it at the moment. And they're not necessarily target that we are controlling. So that's what we have to think, and the Climate Change Board has to think about what are meaningful targets for each year and how we want to measure progress for each year.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Provost. My question is on page 188 of the report, on the table there, 2022-23 KPI data. The first three KPIs, it's just the first three, yes, refer to the target being a 75% reduction on 1990 levels. But what's been shown there is performance in terms of a change over the past year. And I wondered, where are we in relation to our performance against the 75% reduction on 1990 levels in each of these three KPIs? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. Yes, we could have added another column which shows effectively the percentage of reduction from the 1990 levels. What we're trying to show here is obviously the comparison between the year 2021 and the year before 2020, and give us some kind of a trend about are we on trend to reduce from last year or not. I mean, you have a graph as well showing the trend over the whole period there, which shows obviously that we are reducing emissions, but not at a pace that will be needed to match the path of reduction to reach 75% by 2030.
Councillor Ford. Councillor Duff, did you have a follow-up?
No, just to comment on that. I think given that the target is the reduction against 1990 levels, it would be useful, I think, to see what the 1990 level was, what the 2022 level is, and where we are in terms of reduction against that 75% reduction. So I think it would be helpful to have that data, if it's available, included in future. Thank you.
Sure, we can look to include that in the future. Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. It's on 5.12, and it's the Climate Change Commission. I get the sense from reading this that some people have left for a variety of reasons, and the numbers are lower than we'd like them to be. I wonder if Serge could maybe just expand a little bit on what we're doing to reverse that, and particularly to reverse that with more young people. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councillor. So the council has representative on the commission. So we've got the convener and vice conveners of the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee, plus Barbara Renton, the executive director for communities. And they've been engaging with the commission to effectively see how we can help to sustain membership and attract new membership. And at the last meeting, or the one before of the commission, the discussion has took place to see how we can effectively it can happen. And this is when they agreed to effectively relaunch a recruitment campaign, particularly focusing on young people. At that meeting, it was discussed how we can do that, how collectively it can be done, and particularly how we can reach out to schools and to groups in schools which are active on climate change. The example we've given as well is the Youth Climate Conference, which happened in November, which shows a great participation from young people. So it's making more of events like this to see if we can recruit young people to the Commission. However, as you know, it's sometimes difficult to sustain young people participation in a body like a commission because of the different circumstances, personal or in terms of education and so on, for that. But we've been working actively with the commission to see how we can reinvigorate that the membership.
Thanks for that, Serge. I don't want in any way to put words in your mouth, but is there any danger that the Commission may not continue? Are the numbers at that level, or are you confident that the things you're about to do will bring in some new members and get some new life into it?
I think the Commission is aware of the challenges that they have. So they have now, want to take action on these challenges. The Commission is an independent body from the Council, so although it was set up, the Council helped to set it up. It's an independent body, so they have to obviously to take responsibilities for how they want to run their business and how they want to recruit people. But as a Council, we'll try to support them as much as we can in that.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Provost. Coming back to page 224 now on this question of the touchy subject of biodiversity. There's a point here talking about street weed control. And I know Councillor Shires and I have ongoing complaints about the state of pavements in Blairgowrie. It says here we haven't got the financial resources to trial other alternative methods than herbicides. So should we accept that we've got to get these streets under control and get these weeds back? We can't just let the weeds take over everything. We've got enough problems with litter. Can we not start spraying these weeds as we've always done to clear them? They look untidy. They look a mess. We shouldn't be sacrificing the beauty of our streets and towns on the altar of biodiversity, to be honest.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. I'm not directly involved, obviously, in grassland management, and it's really reported from the working group, and so I will have to refer to obviously the people in charge to that. But I believe there was some discussion in the chamber as well, but in other committees about that specific topic. So I think it can maybe picked up in separate from other committees or by other officers after the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey with a question, and then Councillor Forbes with the final question.
Thank you, Provost. In section 5.11, there's a table there. Point number 5 is related to the carbon disclosure project for the city score. Could you give us a wee bit more background as to what that is and how we achieve A by 2024? Thanks.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. So the Council is using benchmarking tools, which are either international or national, to effectively assess where we are in terms of progress and how we can learn from best practice as well, because they're usually at the back of these tools. They're also a network and so on. So the Carbon Disclosure Project City Score is one of them. It's an international benchmarking tool. And it is some benchmarking tools are self-assessed, but this one is not. It is independently audited by the assessors they have as part of that project. And so there's a series of questions that we have to answer, and we have to provide evidence, and most of the time published evidence that the council or other partners have done in the area. So every year we are completing that form, and based on the responses and the assessment from the assessors, they allocate a rating. So last year we had B, but we moved to A. This year. So this is an improvement, which is positive. In some cases, it's also an improvement how the data is presented or published. And sometimes it can go the other way. So when you report more, it could be obviously affect negatively. But in that case, because we've been more thorough and tried to provide more information, to publish more information. That means we've moved positively from B to A.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, the final question.
Thanks, Provost. Serge, can I draw your attention to the appendix? It's page 222 of the document pack, and it's in reference to the Nature Restoration Fund that's enabled us more than 30 projects to be successfully delivered. I wonder if you could maybe give us an outline of one or two of those projects, and do we measure the outcomes of those projects?
Thank you for your question, councillors. I don't have the list of the projects in front of me, but I think they've been reported to the Climate Change and Stability Committee, so I think it will be available for all councillors to look at, and we can provide it, if it's needed. Each project is obviously assessed when they come for consideration, based on the impact it will have on nature restoration in terms of biodiversity or in terms of resilience or so on. So that assessment is carried forward into the award and into the monitoring of the project. So there is some monitoring and assessment of the project when they have been completed based on what the project say they will achieve using the funding.
I had said Councillor Forbes would be the last question, but Councillor Welch has indicated he wants to come in and he hasn't asked a question yet, so a very brief one.
Thank you, Provost. It's page 210 of 326, theme 2, buildings and energy. A question is, it stresses the importance of a fabric first approach. I'm just questioning whether, in light of the strategy being to reduce carbon and a concern in terms of limited capital resources to invest, whether a more balanced approach is required rather than a fabric first approach. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Welsh. I think the Climate Change and Stability Committee just approved the local heat energy efficiency strategy, and that principle was stressed as well, underlined, and it came from feedback from the consultation and engagement with partners, because people were concerned that we will potentially pushing technologies without to effectively change the source of heat, for instance, without doing the reducing the heat demand in the building by reducing heat loss in that building. And so that's why that's stressed here. But yes, of course it has to be a balance between what the building we can do on the building, as because of the fabric of the building itself. Some buildings are obviously much more difficult to insulate, so it would be much more difficult to reduce heat loss for this building. The type of technology that could be obviously introduced in that building to reduce carbon for that building, and obviously the funding available for that. So it's a balance between three elements that it is important to sustain. So you're right, that's a balanced approach. But I think it is stressed there because that was stressed by people when we engaged with them. They were obviously stressing that point of we need to effectively reduce heat loss first.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to come to Councillor Waters to move the report.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Serge, for the presentation of the annual report. In relation to the Nature Restoration Fund, there is a good web page available on the Council's climate change website that gives a list of all the applications that have previously been gone through, and some of the new ones that are currently being approved and will be starting very soon. We are asked to approve the Climate Change Annual Report and Action Plan for 24-25. The report shows that we are making progress year after year, but the challenge is immense and shouldn't be underestimated. We have recently been recognised for our efforts to address the climate change and biodiversity emergencies, achieving a CDP rating of A. I would like to mention just a few of the key achievements highlighted in the report. Delivering the Scottish Government's £2.7 million recycling improvement fund to include city centre food recycling to 1,000 properties, which has also been recently rolled out further, including in Crieff. Also introducing the twin stream recycling services across Perth and Kinross. Opening Riverside Primary School, Perth and Kinross's first passive house primary school, which will save an equivalent 71 tonnes of CO2 per annum. This will be followed by the new Perth High School and Blairgowrie Recreation Centre, targeting engagement with 165 businesses identified as having heat and power demand about 0.5 megawatt hours. And as large employers, we are working with them to reduce their carbon emissions. Supporting Blairgowrie and Rattray to become Scotland's first biodiversity town and St Meadows as first biodiversity village. Expanding provision of home energy advice services and running the Keep Cosy This Winter campaign. We know that there are barriers and constraints, that targets which are set at Scottish level are rightfully very challenging. However, responding to other crises and emergencies can impact on resources required, which are beyond our current means. At the second Climate Youth Conference, when young people were asked to describe their feelings about climate change, worried and concerned were at the top of the list. However, when they were asked to describe their feelings about what they could do, motivated and determined were at the top of the list. We must learn from our young people and work with them to show the commitment to provide a more sustainable place. We could be overwhelmed by the scale of the challenge, but it does not mean that we cannot act at our level and within our means. We should be motivated and determined to do so. I would like to recognise the commitment and dedication of all who have produced this report and continue to deliver the agreed actions. We will continue to raise the resource and delivery challenges associated with addressing the climate and biodiversity emergencies with COSLA, the Scottish and UK governments and other relevant bodies whenever appropriate. We as the Council are committed to continue to lead by example and work with our young people, residents, businesses, communities and stakeholders to achieve all we can at our level within our own means, and we urge everyone to do the same. I move this paper for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Councillor Liz Barrett, second, please.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you, Councillor Waters. I'd also like to add my thanks to Davindy Grant, Viv Milford, Serge Marone and Scott Nichol and the whole climate change team for this report and all the work that lies behind it. As Richard and Serge have mentioned, we were delighted to hear last month that Perth and Kinross received an A rating from CDP, recognising our bold leadership on environmental action and on transparency. Only 119 cities in the world have this rating, and we got there from a D in 2019 and a C just 2 years ago to A, which is international recognition of our efforts to address the climate and biodiversity emergencies and our transparent approach and climate action plan and goals. We've achieved a lot as set out in the report, but we need to do more, faster, to meet our climate change targets. We need a clear and consistent plan and approach to funding from the Scottish and UK governments. And as a council, we need to continue to commit resources, which we know are scarce, to our climate and biodiversity priorities as set out in the plan in this report. As has been highlighted already, the public sector, of which Perth and Kinross Council is part, represents less than 3% of emissions in Perth and Kinross, but everyone can help us tackle the climate and biodiversity emergencies. Some things may look and be a bit different, but as the paper recognises, the impacts of climate change are likely to be felt by the people who are already at risk of poverty and other disadvantages, and we need to take a fair approach to addressing the concerns and challenges that face us all, which were highlighted at the youth conference earlier this year. We can all help to reduce transport emissions by choosing to use the car less and not idling our engines. We can save energy by putting on an extra jumper, looking at you, Peter Barrett. We can think about reducing and especially reducing food waste, reusing and recycling as much as we can over the festive season and into next year. And I would encourage all councillors to please make a New Year's resolution to do the carbon literacy training as soon as you can. It really did help to inform and inspire me about what we can do and why. I'm very happy to second this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor McCall with a comment.
Thank you, Provost. And I just want to add my thanks and appreciation for all the work that officers and elected members have done in pursuing this agenda. There is one, and I agree with Councillor Barrett, there is still a lot more to be done. And I think there's one area that perhaps we need to start considering how we incorporate this, and that's the area of public health. There is a public health impact in relation to the climate change and environmental matters. And as a member of the Integrated Joint Board here in Perth and Kinross and NHS Tayside Board, I'm more than happy going forward, if the committee so wish, and officers to provide any sort of liaison that I can possibly do. So but I think public health is a big issue that we should consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Councillor Bob Brown.
Thank you, Provost. I'm not sure if many members saw it on television. Some time ago, there was a debate in Holyrood, which was led by Mr. Swinney, John Swinney, predominantly to do with climate cafes and the good work they do. It was a shame that there were more members of Climate Cafe present in the chamber than there were MSPs, but I suppose that's one of those things. All the parties had a spokesman who addressed them. And I think it's fair to say that climate cafes do a good job, and they do help people understand what needs to be done and the most basic things that can be done to help the climate emergency. But at the end of the debate, Mari McCallan stood up and summed up, and she said something which I think is very true and very apt, and that was that when it comes to climate emergency, climate change, there is no one-size-fits-all solution to this. We need to accept that what works, for example, in London or Birmingham, Manchester, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Perth, Dundee, doesn't always work in the Glens. We need to have an appreciation of the problems in different areas and have to try and balance the emissions from rural areas, for example, who need wood burning stoves, for example, to keep warm, against the savings that you can make in cities. So I think this is something which we need to take on board. I don't see it much in this report, but I think that's something that's very true, and we should take to heart that when it comes to climate change, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. We have to balance things off from area to area, and I think we as Perth and Kinross will go so far. Scotland will be able to go a bit further. The UK will go a bit further, and so on and so forth across the whole world. So I think it's something we need to take on board. It's not a question of telling people what they have to do. It's looking at what their needs are and adapt from there. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. Councillor Reddick.
Thanks, Provost. I think it is important, actually, away from the official speeches, as it were, that we recognise the CDP rating of A and recognise the great work of officers in achieving this, and actually the political leadership of Councillors Barrett and Councillor Water as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Bailey.
Thank you, Provost. And I'll provide a trigger warning ahead of what I'm about to say by first thanking the dedicated officers of this council who I know are all committed to tackling this climate emergency. My frustrations that I'll express are reserved wholly for the body political. Greenwashing is the process of doing a good thing and pointing at it over here in order to distract folk from the real environmental damage that's going on elsewhere. Heard phrases like leading by example and offering bold leadership today in the other political speeches. I do not recognise those accolades in respect of our area, and it's very easy for us to pat ourselves on the back. The Council's emissions in tonnes of CO2 for this reporting period were a shade under 40 kilotonnes of CO2. We heard earlier that the CTLR design and construction are expected to emit 50 kilotonnes of CO2. Yes, the CTLR construction is a multi-year project, but what I'm highlighting today is that the emissions solely from the construction of the CTLR are a quarter higher than the entirety of the Council's yearly emissions. I'll say that again, a quarter higher just for the CTLR than our whole yearly emissions. My opposition to this climate destroying road is well documented, and I'm glad that the 50 kilotons of CO2 that's drifting into the atmosphere right now is not being done in my name. I'll end by making a confession, Provost. I must confess I'm not one of the councillors who is, I must confess that I'm one of the councillors who has yet to attend the carbon literacy training referred to on page 236. Good though I'm sure the carbon literacy training is, building a road while claiming we care about climate change is the definition of climate illiteracy, so I'm feared to go on the training lest I end up in that same boat, Provost. Thank you.
Councillor Waters, would you like to sum up?
I don't think I need to, there's not an amendment, is there?
No, but you have the opportunity to sum up if you wish.
I'm okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, are we happy to agree the report? Thank you. Members, we now move on to item 10, transformation review of arm's length external organisations, and Fiona Robertson, Head of Culture and Communities, will introduce the report.
Hello, councillors, can you hear me? Hello, councillors, can you hear me? Great, thank you. Yep. Councillors, as you know, culture and sport are integral to our wider objectives of tackling poverty and reducing inequality, and so we've spent heavily on them in the last few decades. Just for clarity, this report does not recommend a merging of the arm's length external organisations that we currently fund, but it does recommend that we consolidate corporate functions across the ALIOs, and the reason for that is to help ensure that council spend is focused on maintaining frontline delivery of these services in the years to come. Nor does it recommend or ask you to make decisions today about the future of Perth city centre sports provision, although it alludes to that. As you are aware, there is a concurrent review of our leisure assets which will come to council in January. There are wider recommendations in the report. Section 5 gives you the background. Section 6 summarises the key findings in relation to income and expenditure pressures, usage, property, and our wider governance and oversight framework for ALIOs. Sections 7 and 8 give you all of the recommendations and some immediate next steps, which I'm recommending. Now, all of this is about intending to make sure that we have long-term financial sustainability for these organisations. It's a significant change programme, which in some ways mirrors the change programme which is ongoing within the wider council. And for that reason, I'm recommending a 3-year timescale for implementation. I'd like to thank the 3 chief executives of the ALIOs whose input to this review has been significant and constructive. And I'd also like to thank colleagues from Glasgow Audit who are in the meeting who prepared the independent report, which is at Appendix 1, and both they and I are happy to take questions.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson with the first question.
Thank you for the introduction to the report, which was quite grim reading, some of it, and some of it's quite understandable. But the report, the one thing the report didn't say, and because of that, to me, it made it almost meaningless, was the resource implications that what the recommendations in the contained in the report would lead to. So I just didn't understand why we've got recommendations in front of us with no idea as to where the money's going to come from to put them into practice.
Councillor Robertson, in the immediate next step set out in Section 8, there is further work that needs to be done, particularly around the potential efficiencies, both in terms of cash and time, from consolidating the corporate support functions across the ALIOs. I don't like to call them back office functions because they're very important functions, but nonetheless there are key similarities across all three, where the review found there is scope to consolidate and streamline how we deliver. There are no immediately obvious answers in terms of the cash pressures that the ALIOs face, and the report is clear about that. A significant number of the recommendations are in relation to property, because as I've said in the report, the current property portfolio managed by the ALIOs is not affordable. So this is a significant and multi-layered problem in terms of the financial challenge, and this review and the recommendations are the immediate next steps to try and address that.
Councillor Robertson, you might.
Yeah, could I just have a follow-up to that? So the fact that the report has come before us means that officers are confident that the recommendations are affordable if we agree to take forward the recommendations in the report. The council can afford to do what the report suggests.
I'm confident that the recommendations in the report will help the council to start to address the significant financial pressures faced by the ALIOs.
You can have a further follow-up.
I've just had the builders in, obviously, and I've asked them for a quote, and they won't give me a price for doing the job. This is what this sounds like a wee bit. I mean, I can understand your difficulty, Fiona, but it would have been helpful if you're making decisions. It's always useful to try and identify how we're going to do it, because all the things you've suggested here cost a substantial amount of money, some more than others, to do what's suggested. So it would have been helpful, I would suggest, to know that we can do it, we can find the resources. And it's important we do what you've suggested in the report. It is very important we do it, but it's equally important that we have identified where the money can come from. Thank you.
Councillor Robertson, as the report says, in 2024-25, the ALIOs collectively will face revenue pressures of at least £2.5 million. There are one-off costs of change associated with these recommendations, including in relation to property, and there's further work to do around the pay and grading structure across the three ALIOs, as I've alluded to. We haven't costed all of that in detail, and it hasn't been possible to do that within the timescale for this review. There is money in the council's cultural reserves, which is already ring-fenced for dealing with some of the one-off costs of change associated with ALIOs, and we have looked at ALIOs, as you know, in the past. So this is a first step. I take your point that there are no immediate ready answers. I'm not going to put numbers to costs of change which would not have integrity.
I think the Chief Executive is going to also add to this answer.
Thank you, Provost. I'm not going to add anything, particularly on
Fiona's response, because I think it's been very clear. What I would like to say is this is a clear statement of intent in terms of what we are asking our ALIO partners to do. Seeks their response to the challenges that they are facing in terms of the resource available to deliver public services across Perth and Kinross. You committed back in June 2022 to support a transformation programme inside the council. And at that time, officers sought your commitment in principle and subsequently have delivered the beginnings of some financial efficiencies through last year's budget process and the leadership review. We are asking our colleagues in the ALIOs to make a similar commitment to transformation and change. And for us as officers to be able to work with them, it does require your direction and support for us to be able to begin that process. Clearly, we will bring you back updates in terms of progress, subject to you confirming your approval of this report, but that does require the ALIOs, the boards, the chief executives, to work in a productive manner with us. And to be clear, that the process of transformation and change is something that they cannot be exempt from.
Councillor Duff, you have a point of clarification.
Yes, I was just wanting to clarify whether the chief executives of the three boards are present in the meeting today online or not. Thank you.
They have been invited to watch the meeting. I'm not sure if they're all online, Councillor Duff.
No, just whether they were available for any comment of that, but they're obviously not involved in it to that extent. Thank you.
No, and I think this is a council decision, and therefore it's for our. Okay, Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Provost. Fiona, you referenced the three chief executives who obviously had some kind of input into this. I'm not going to name the one that's written to me, and I assume has written to all of us, and I'm fairly confident, Fiona, you've probably seen a copy of that letter. So he's clearly not happy with the situation. So can I ask two very straightforward questions? Have the boards of the ALIOs had the chance to meet and discuss this since the paper went public? And have we had any kind of briefing on this paper in advance of the decision we have to make today?
The Council Chief Executive and I met the ALIO chairs and chief executives about a week and a half before the report went, 2 weeks before the report went live on the council website. So it was then a matter for the ALIO chairs to brief their wider boards and facilitate a discussion with their boards if they wanted to do that. Councillor Forbes. We haven't run an elected member development session on this particular transformation review. We don't do that necessarily for all reviews. We did provide a briefing note to the Finance and Resources Committee on the scope and background to the review in November.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Provost. I want to ask a question, also to speak in support of this motion, albeit with some caveats. But I think in terms of transparency, I'll state quite clearly here, and I'm speaking as a councillor, but I'm a Director Trustee of Culture, Perth and Kinross. Previously, I had been a Director Trustee of the Old Horse Cross, now Perth Theatre and Concert Hall. The question I want to ask is on governance, and we state, Fiona, that to reinstate the quarterly monitoring of ALIOs by the Scrutiny and Performance Committee, and internal audit will have a role in that process. So that the ALIOs don't get encumbered by a whole lot of governance procedures, what will the role be of Audit and Risk Committee, or will that be limited to specific reports in specific areas? I remember, for instance, the report on the cash collection at campuses, and it's quite a critical report. That's about 3-4 years ago.
The detailed role of both scrutiny and performance and audit and risk will obviously be matters for the conveners of those committees that I'll discuss with them if the recommendations today are approved. I think as a general principle, Councillor Donaldson, to say that the role of scrutiny and indeed audit committees should be based on a risk and proportionality approach. And the annual governance statement which the Council prepares for Audit Scotland and to which the ALIOs contribute annually should be the starting point for that. So what are the key areas of risk across the three ALIOs? And how does scrutiny and indeed audit exercise its oversight and control in terms of understanding and managing those risks to the Council? A very helpful point, I think, in the Glasgow Audit Report, which colleagues and I discussed at some length, was to try and think about, whilst we respect the independent personalities, if you like, of each ALIOs, they are collectively delivering a group of services, a family group of services, and we invest significantly in them. So our role, your role as councillors and our role as a council is to make sure we've got a clear overview of that group of services as a whole, understand where risks are popping up, and what can be done to mitigate, control, manage those risks, rather than think about the ALIOs in independent silos. And the role of scrutiny and performance, and I have had some discussion with the convener prior to this meeting, and audit is really key to that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Liz Barrett.
Thank you, Provost. I note I must admit, I was a bit dismayed to see that there was no internal audit function in any of the organisations at present. I see in the further recommendations from Glasgow Audit on page 272 that they are recommending establishment of an internal audit function, but it doesn't appear in the recommendations or the key actions. So I just wanted to ask Mrs. Robertson if this will be considered in tandem with the consolidation steps that are set out in section 8, and also Glasgow Audit suggested that this could be provided by PKC internal audit team, and I wondered if that had been discussed and also what the resourcing implications of that would be. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett, the report by Glasgow Audit makes a number of recommendations, quite specific recommendations, which broadly are all about the corporate support functions within the ALIOs, including, as you rightly say, the current lack of an internal audit function and procurement expertise. So the recommendation in the main report, which is about looking at and consolidating the corporate support functions across all three, is intended to cover within it those specific points. We haven't had any discussion at this stage about the capacity and role of the Council's internal audit function to take on that role for the Council, but for the ALIO, but as the Chief Executive's alluded to, I think we need to see this report and its recommendations within the wider context of how do we consolidate, streamline where we can these kinds of support functions for services which are delivered across or by the Council family group.
Thank you.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you for the report. Fiona, if I can just ask a question. In your opening remarks, you mentioned that there was no view at this stage for a future merger. I hope I got that correct, and I'm not putting words into your mouth. On page 275 at 8.1, talking about next steps, it suggests that we'll be looking at options which may be a consolidation or a merger. And I think people or businesses that are involved in this, there'll be a raging fire of concern and suspicion that we are indeed looking towards some form of future consolidation or merger. Is there a future merger in the plan?
Councillor Allen, this review started with no foregone conclusions. It is the third review of ALIOs that I've done in my 12 coming up to 13 years in the council, so I know them reasonably well. And I also know the wider landscape at both national and local level in terms of arm's length bodies in all their different forms reasonably well. There is no hidden agenda around merging the ALIOs, and as the report makes clear, I hope, there is significant benefit from a customer and an audience perspective to ALIOs which have their own distinct personality and brand. The services that the ALIOs deliver are all different, but I think if we focus overly much on the differences between the three, we are in danger of forgetting about the commonality. And the commonality that they all have, or should have, is audiences and customers. And as the data tells us, for all three of them, predominantly their audiences and customers are local. So there is no hidden agenda around this report, or indeed any other piece of work that I have done or my colleagues have done in relation to the ALIOs, but there are some very big challenges. And if we all are focused, as I believe we are, on protecting frontline services, culture and sports services for customers and audiences, these recommendations are where we need to focus our energy.
Thank you, Councillor Sean Stewart.
Thanks. Thank you, Provost. I do have some sympathy with the points that Councillors Duff and Forbes made about being able to ask questions of the ALIOs directly, either the chief executives who are online or the to discuss with the boards potentially through a development session. I think it would also have been useful maybe to have are they called Glasgow Audit or Audit Glasgow? Glasgow Audit, Audit Glasgow. Just to, I'm being misdirected by my colleague.
Glasgow Audit are here.
Oh, they are?
They are here, so if you have questions relating to that, we can pick that up.
Okay, well, I might come back on that point then. But my first question then would be, when you had the conversation with the chairs and chief executives of the three ALIOs, what were their major concerns? What areas of pushback did they have, or what recommendations did they not like in terms of what's put forward in the paper?
I'm happy to offer a view. They raised a number of concerns. My sense fundamentally was leave us to do what we're doing and let us continue to do what we're doing, and we will do that to the best of our abilities. And we don't particularly see the need for you to look at some of those corporate organisational functions. We think it works okay. On the same theme, I did have correspondence with a number of the ALIOs about the appointment to finance positions, which a number of them are making, and about the timing of those appointments. And again, made it clear that my own view, but fundamentally it's a decision for the boards, was that they should wait for the outcome of this review before progressing certain appointments. So there is clearly a willingness to work with us, but I'll go back to my earlier comment. I think unless we have a mandate from council that's clear that we expect that will look in a meaningful way some of the challenges round about consolidation and being as efficient as we possibly be collectively as that local authority family, our public sector family that that Fiona referred to, then I think that will prove difficult. The property issues, they have very reasonable concerns, similar to ourselves, in terms of the fabric and the cost of property. So I think we're very much on the same page as that. But again, to be clear on what Fiona said, there was no predetermined outcome on this. There is no grand plan to create a single ALIO or to bring them all back into council. That has never been the intention. This is the beginning of a process, and where it ends in a couple of years' time will be determined by the financial environment we find ourselves in, and what we do alongside the ALIOs over the next couple of years.
Thank you. Bailey.
Thank you. I did try using Google to find the answer to this first, but my question is a naive one. I think I know this from something about this from the last term, but who are Glasgow Audit to the extent of how are they constituted? What kind of organisation are they? Was it a paid relationship, a paid engagement? Just looking, I think I know the answer to some of this, but for the general public and broader councillors, it would be useful to know a bit more about who Glasgow Audit are and what their remit is and how they're set up. Thank you.
Bailey, I'll invite either Gillian Campbell or Duncan Black from Glasgow Audit, who are in the meeting, to say a little bit about themselves as an organisation. What I will say generally is we invited Glasgow Audit to do this piece of work because they have very significant experience with ALIOs. Glasgow operate and fund quite a large number of them of different varieties. This was a paid commission discussed between me and Glasgow Audit at the outset, and also the scope of the Glasgow Audit review was provided in a briefing note to Finance and Resources Committee. But Duncan, do you want to say a bit more about your role?
Certainly, Fiona, thanks. So I'm head of audit and inspection at Glasgow City Council, and I head up the internal audit team here. We launched the Audit Glasgow initiative a few years ago now, and its purpose is really to, where it makes sense and for both organisations, is to provide internal audit services to other public bodies. Usually this is other local authorities, and ranges from a full internal audit service, which we provide, for example, at Shetland Islands Council, but also to do ad hoc pieces of work such as this one. So to answer your question, Bailey, we are a local authority in-house internal audit team at Glasgow City Council, but we do offer our services where we can to other local authorities and other public bodies. Hope that makes sense. Thank you.
Follow up, Bailey.
Thank you. Just happy to confirm that they aren't an ALIO and they're part of the council at Glasgow. That's reassuring. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Provost. I've got sort of two parts to my question. Firstly relates to paragraph 3.1 and to ask what financial system does the council use, and is it capable of providing a separate module to each ALIO? And the second part of my question relates to recommendation and payroll in recommendation 10 and payroll. And can we hear from either Audit Glasgow or officers what would be the disadvantages of taking the minimalist approach and only having two or having duplication of payroll systems by having two ALIOs share the same one and one not, as opposed to having them all share the one system? Sorry, the first part of my question was relating to paragraph 3.1 of the covering report, and that was to ask what financial system does the council use, and was it capable of providing three separate modules to each, or one separate module to each of the ALIOs?
Scott Walker's going to answer the question.
Thanks, Provost. So I can answer the first part of the question. The council uses Integra as its ledger system, and it does allow us to have what we call multi-companies. So we can set up different organisations within the ledger suite that we operate.
Oh, okay, that's about. On payroll, yes. So the question is about the capability, again, of the council to provide.
No,
can
sorry,
answer
Fiona.
that.
Recommendation 10 says there's a minimum 2 of the LEOs should share one payroll system as opposed to having them all move on to the one payroll system. And I was wondering, why should we settle for the minimal sharing when you'd assume that you'd get greater efficiencies and savings out of everybody having the same payroll system?
Pauline Johnston is also on the call to answer if Pauline.
Well, payroll systems can be set up for multiple employers. So there's not an issue in terms of that, in terms of real-time returns for HMRC and meeting legal requirements around that. So whether it's one provider that's been bought in or whether it's the HR system that we currently use, we could supply multiple employers that are segregated and meet audit requirements from that perspective. So I presume that would be the same regardless of which system was actually used.
Okay, thank you. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, in section 8.1 of the report under the next steps, the final point is re-property rationalisation plan. Can you expand on exactly which direction that will take? Because, you know, there's a recommendation consolidation of Perth City Sports into one site, library recommendations, and will that sort of evaluate the reutilisation of areas, space within buildings, say such as Dewars, where there is areas that are underutilised, and then also in light of the recent flooding of Bells and the current withdrawal of the gym offering, could you just maybe give us a bit more of a clarity and a timescale? Thank you.
Bailey McLaren, I'll take that in two parts. I'll deal with Perth City Centre sports facilities, and then secondly with the issues around property in the localities, and Stephen Crawford, strategic lead for property, who I think is in the meeting, may want to add on the second part. On the first part, in terms of sports provision in Perth City Centre, as I said in the introduction, there is a concurrent review going on into leisure facilities. The issues around Dewars, Bells Sports Centre and Perth Leisure Pool are complex and were complex, notwithstanding the current issues that Lowell colleagues are dealing with in relation to Bells. Those three venues collectively, and I make this comment alongside, you know, a very clear understanding and appreciation of the social and community well-being that those venues and services provide, but collectively they operate at an annual deficit of around £1.6 million. Bells operates at a deficit of somewhere around £540,000 a year. So there are issues that we as a council need to consider very carefully. Again, going back to the principle of how do we protect and make the most of council investment in frontline services. The recommendations of the leisure asset review will come back to council on the 22nd of January within the wider umbrella of property asset management across the council as a whole, and that will include some proposed next steps in terms of timescales for work that we need to do on thinking about and planning for the sports offer in Perth City. So I don't have a detailed answer for you this afternoon about what that will look like, but that work is in hand. In the localities, Stephen Crawford and his team are developing a kind of challenge process for looking at each locality in turn and the local property assets within that locality in terms of how are they currently maximised and used and utilised, and by whom. What's the condition of the building and what will it cost the council to maintain it? Are there other options for how that building, if there is a clear, obvious purpose for it, for how it might be run in the future? And so the recommendations in this report around library provision in particular will be taken forward with those principles in mind. Where there are opportunities for community asset transfer or community-led managed provision in the future, we will look at that. That's not always possible, but we hope in some key areas that it will be.
Thank you. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Provost. My question is along, I suppose, similar lines to Councillor Peter Barrett's question about the finance system, and my question really is, why is it that the ALIOs don't currently use the council's financial system? Is it a cost-related matter?
I think, to be candid, Councillor Duff, it's just custom and practice and how these three organisations have been set up and evolved over time. Live Active Leisure is the oldest ALIO, certainly leisure ALIO, I think, anywhere in the UK, and originally was born, if you like, from the council, or certainly the local authority back in the day. Culture Perth and Kinross was set up much more recently. Perth Theatre and Concert Hall somewhere in between. There has been a lot of discussion over the years about whether it is right for ALIOs to take their corporate support functions from councils, and does that still allow them to demonstrate full independence? They can, and whilst remaining fully independent, so long as they can demonstrate full independence of decision making. So I don't think there is any particular reason why they've all ended up with slightly different ways of doing things financially. What I am saying to you is, in terms of our ability to understand risk across this group of services, and all three ALIOs have faced significant financial risk, not just because of COVID, but certainly exacerbated by COVID and other things that have happened in recent years. So the opportunity now to do something about that by having a stronger overall financial system, which can generate more readily really strong financial reports, give us better management information about the running costs of each ALIO, is one that I would be keen that Council considers very seriously.
Thank you. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. I think it's very welcome, and I also welcome your comments that each of the ALIOs are distinct and have key differences between them. However, my question really is around the procurement proposals that are here on page 272 of our report, item 6.11, and recommendation 11 on page 275. I welcome the fact that we can provide support to the ALIOs in terms of procurement expertise. However, I would like some assurance that the subject matter expertise of the ALIOs themselves would be integral to any procurement, both in terms of developing the specifications and indeed the evaluation criteria and ongoing contract management. Thank you.
Yes, I can give you that assurance.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Thank you, Provost. My second question relates to the business rates relief question. The paper refers to rationalisation of the properties, assisting us to make best use of that. And I notice in the audit Glasgow report in point 3.7 that there's a figure of 1.7 million there. So do I take it from that we are capped in how much rates relief we can claim at the moment, and if we sort out the properties better, we'll be able to make better use of that, or make sure we're using as much of it as we can? Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Constable.
Thanks, Provost. So seeing as Audit Glasgow are here, I note in their report at 2.2, it talks about the Scrutiny and Performance Committee receiving reports generally on an annual basis. I'm not sure that we've ever had a gap of a year between attendances of the ALIOs at either Scrutiny and Performance or the prior Scrutiny Committee. But my question then is about just I'm trying to match up the recommendation in the covering report with the recommendation from recommendation 1 from the appendix to the audit report. And I wonder whether we're conflating quarterly monitoring of ALIOs by Scrutiny and Performance Committee with the recommendation that there should be specific financial monitoring reported at a reasonable frequency to monitor impact on the general fund suggested quarterly. There's a difference between financial monitoring coming quarterly and actually reinstating quarterly attendance of the ALIOs at Scrutiny and Performance Committee. And obviously, Ms. Robertson would had the opportunity, as you said, to speak about that before the meeting. So I'm just trying to reconcile those two things, because the other thing that I notice is that in the Finance and Resources Committee, in the revenue monitoring reports, we do get an update on from our head of finance on the on the risks associated with the ALIO's budget position at that point in time as well.
Duncan, do you want to?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks for your question. There's probably just a couple of things at play within this, so I'm happy to clarify it. I think your question is valid. I think first and foremost it is to be clear that the council's duty in our mind is to hold the ALIOs to account for the services that they ask the ALIOs to deliver through the SLAs and subsequently also pay for through service fees. So the starting point for that is making sure that SLAs are up to date and are clear in terms of what it is the council expects to receive. What then should follow from that, in our view, is a reasonably regular performance scrutiny and monitoring against that. So are the ALIOs delivering the services and outcomes that the council asks them to do, with that specific link into the key council, the council plan and council priorities. So I think we're suggesting there should be a clearer link, a thread from that all the way through to the monitoring committee. I haven't been specific on how frequently that should be. I think management at the council, as you've outlined, suggested that could be quarterly through a reinstatement of a previous process. I think our observation is more about how that information is presented at Scrutiny Committee. On the financial side, again, I think it's just about being very clear about the role of the council in that. My view is that the council should have an overview of the overall financial performance of the ALIOs in gross terms, but with specific focus on the impact on the general fund. And again, that comes back to the service fee and etc. from that. So I think it's been clear that there is a role for the council to play, and that is not to detract from the role of the board, which will have the global view of the ALIO performance and the ALIO financial performance.
Bailey.
Thank you. My question is about 5.4, which talks about the fact that there may be employment issues arising from the current sole trust model. I'm struggling to get my head around that. I wonder if we could have a sort of more plain English description of what the challenge is there, and specifically what a sole trust model is, please.
Sorry, Bailey, I didn't get just the last sentence.
Specifically what a sole trust model is.
Bailey, a sole member company is pretty much what it says on the tin. So instead of having a number of directors who are effectively shareholders in the company, and that was the case for Live Active Leisure and what was formerly Horsecross Arts Limited prior to 2013, there is only one shareholder, and in the case of these three ALIOs, that's the council. The sole member company model is the most frequently used model for ALIOs, certainly in Scotland. not necessarily across the rest of the UK. And the reason for that pragmatically is that the council's the core funder. It's not the only funder, but it's the core funder. And in the case of our 3 ALIOs, with the exception of 3 key buildings, it owns all of the assets as well. So pragmatically, you know, in the event of a catastrophic problem in any of the ALIOs, the council's the underwriter and it's the operator of last resort. And that's one of the reasons why we use that model, probably the biggest reason. And there is debate about whether that's good, bad or indifferent, but that is the model that we use in common with most councils. I've forgotten the first part of your question, apologies. So it is for ALIOs as part of their independent decision making to set pay terms and conditions within the ALIOs. However, one of the things that the review has identified over the course of the work that we've been doing in the last few months is that there are some differences in pay terms and conditions across the 3 ALIOs in relation to some of the comparable functions within those ALIOs. I'm talking about the corporate support functions, and we would like to have a look at those in more detail. As you are aware, Bailey, one of the ALIOs doesn't currently pay the real living wage, and we understand the cost pressures that creates for the ALIOs, but equally what the review has highlighted very strongly is that the biggest pressure, financial pressure facing them aside from property is pay. So it's important that we think about that in the round and do some more work on it to understand what is going to be an affordable pay envelope across this group of services over the next few years. And that's a piece of work that we have not done in detail yet, but it is a priority in my view, and in discussion with Pauline Johnson and others who have advised on this aspect of the review.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Provost. And can I ask about recommendation 8 in the report about community halls? How many community halls are actually operated by a Live Active Leisure? And also, in each case, will it be difficult for the community to take over responsibility for them?
LAL currently operate 9 community halls on behalf of the council, Councillor Robertson. There's been a piece of work ongoing for the last few months, and you may remember that in the budget this year, council approved additional funding to support community asset transfer of these halls. There are a number of them where, just through our engagement with local communities, we know that there is some appetite and enthusiasm to take on the management, if not necessarily the ownership of these halls, and those are the areas where we and the communities that we're working with first. The question of community halls has also been looked at in the context or as part of the leisure assets review, and there are some more detailed recommendations that I'll be setting out in that report to you in January.
Brief follow-up.
There are examples of very successful community-led halls in Perth and Kinross. So if we can do this, I would certainly support it.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thanks, Provost. And I'm sitting here thinking, what on earth? You mentioned, Fiona, that we have 3 different ALIOs with slight differences, and I think if we're trying to bring them back in under one roof, we're probably going in the wrong direction. Have the boards who they're made up of some real probably the best people in the field to actually be running these boards, but have the 3 boards been sat down with you to discuss possible addressing the concerns you have around pay and buildings and what have you? I know you've met them individually, but have you actually met together and given them an opportunity to address problems?
Councillor James, the report doesn't say that there are slight differences between the services that the three ALIOs deliver. It acknowledges that there are significant differences in what each of the three ALIOs do. They've all got their own specialist areas of expertise. What the report does say is that there are corporate support functions, and the Chief Executive has touched on this in his answer as well, which are broadly similar across the three. Payroll is one example, facilities management, cleaning, things like that, and that there is scope to consolidate and find some efficiencies by bringing some of those functions together, just as we are currently doing in the council. The report, as I said at the outset, does not recommend either merging the three ALIOs or bringing these services in-house, and important, I think, to be clear about that. And finally, in terms of dialogue with the ALIOs themselves, the Council Chief Executive and I have met with all three ALIO chairs, all their nominated representatives, together with their Chief Executives. We did that at the outset of the review. We did it at midpoint during the review, and we did it most recently on the 20th of November before this report went into the public domain. The ALIO Chief Executives were part of the review team and contributed to the data and evidence that we looked at for the review.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, Provost. I'm concerned that the ALIOs aren't represented in this meeting. I think they would give an awful lot of feedback. Can you explain why they weren't invited to attend? We've had Glasgow Audit attend. We've had everybody from one side. I'd like to hear two sides of the story.
Councillor Illingworth, all three ALIO Chief Executives were aware of the meeting and invited to watch the meeting. They are not officers of the council. This is my report, and it's my responsibility to answer questions on this report. As I've just said, all three Chief Executives were members of the review team and contributed significantly to the review report. Now, I know that the recommendations are challenging for the ALIOs, and again, the Council Chief Executive has touched on that, but all due effort was made to fully engage the ALIOs through the Chief Executives in carrying out this review, and they contributed significantly to it, for which I am grateful.
The Chief Executive would like to come in at this point.
Thank you, Provost. I would have taken the opportunity at the end of this item to thank Fiona for the work that's been done on pulling this report together, and the input from Glasgow Audit and colleagues in the three ALIOs. Fiona's absolutely correct. This report presents some challenging recommendations for the ALIOs and for you as members. I'm very clear that this is a decision for you as council to take. And based on some recent correspondence, and I'll have a meeting with Mr. Glasgow next week on the specific correspondence that he had sent round to members yesterday. I'll pick that up with him next week. But this is a decision for you as members of the council to enable us as officers to implement your decision, if supported, to begin a process of working with the ALIOs. And we have worked with the ALIOs over a number of years. I know that Fiona on a number of occasions has raised through budget processes the challenges that we face as a council, that they face, has encouraged the ALIOs to look off their own back to do more things together. That has been limited to date. I think this mandate is required for us to be able to work as effectively as we need to be, and for our colleagues in the ALIOs to see that we are serious about them working with us through a process of transformation and change.
Can I comment?
You can have a follow-up, yes.
I just think that we need to see the whole picture. We need to have information from not only the council but from the ALIOs themselves. And it would, as councillors, we have to think of the whole picture, and it would be helpful to have information from both sides. So thank you.
I think it's just worth reflecting that obviously the Glasgow audit is an independent report that has taken the views of the three ALIOs and is to provide members with an informed independent perspective. The council officer report that covers the council officer position, and obviously we are debating as councillors our own reflections on it, but the Glasgow audit report does have input from the three ALIOs as part of that. Councillor Duff.
So it's a second question, is that where we are on the?
Well, I'm well through other people's second
Okay,
questions. Councillor Duff,
no, that's fine.
You want yours now? Is the time to go?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I forgot which page it's on. But anyway, obviously there are references in the report to living wage issues and real living wage issues. And if my calculations are correct, it seems to suggest that the average wage within Culture PK is 41,000, within LAL it's 35,000, and within the theatre and concert hall it's 29,000. Is that correct? Are these figures accurate in terms of dividing the employee costs by the number of employees to come up with average wage?
Councillor Duff, that may be correct. I would counsel you quite strongly against drawing any particular conclusions from that. The ALIOs, as we've rehearsed already pretty well in this meeting, do very different things in some respects, in not all respects. They all currently have local pay terms and conditions agreements in place. We need to have a look at that issue in more detail. And for that reason, as I've said, that is a priority next step, assuming that you approve the recommendations in this report.
Okay, thank you. And final question, even Councillor Welch.
Thank you, Provost. Can I squeeze a second one there, but it's very much linked. It's page 273, 6.12, external funding. It's clear that significant external funding does come into all three organisations, and there have been efforts to essentially identify some of those external funders' views on the report. It was just if it's possible to possibly elaborate a bit more on that, if that's okay. And the second question was in page 289, section 3.18, and it's just around risk, specifically around ICT. So shared systems, processes, digitalisation of services, support, hijacking of potentially customers and data. That's obviously a risk, and again, just your view on potentially how that stands at the moment with the benefits of potentially a subsequent more aligned service linked into the council's expertise. Thank you.
So on your question about the views of external funders first, Councillor Welsh, and just in specific reference, first of all, to Perth Museum, because one of the things that we did consider quite carefully before starting this review was the fact that all three ALIOs have got a lot going on at the moment, a lot on their plates, but in addition, we're opening a £27 million new project next year. Within the business case for Perth Museum, we were very explicit about the fact that we would be reviewing the ALIO delivery model at some point during the timeline for the project, for exactly the reasons that I've spelt out, which is how do we streamline where appropriate ways of doing things, particularly around the corporate support functions. In terms of the use of external funders, the Council Chief Executive and I met the relatively new Chief Executive of Sports Scotland in recent months, just as part of our general update, in which we spelt out the fact that this review was ongoing, the drivers for it, some of the emerging conclusions at that point. I think the view of Sports Scotland was that our position and the challenges that we face are not dissimilar to those that they are seeing all over the country, to be honest. And there are significant challenges for LAL in terms of, the size of the infrastructure that it manages. That infrastructure is aging, customer use is changing in some key respects, not all, etc., etc. So I don't think from Sports Scotland's point of view there was anything particularly surprising in what we were doing or why we are doing it. Creative Scotland is changing its multi-year funding arrangements to, it manages a portfolio of organisations across the country, of which Perth Theatre and Concert Hall is one, Pitlochry Festival Theatre is the other, in the Perth and Kinross Council patch, and that process is ongoing. So where Perth Theatre and Concert Hall are at the moment is they have submitted their stage 1 application for 3-year funding from 2025-26 onwards, and they will start their stage 2 process in spring next year. Again, I've discussed the review and the findings with Creative Scotland colleagues, explained our rationale, explained that front and centre, this is about protecting council investment in services and assets that we have invested very heavily in over the last 30 years. I mean, well upwards of 60 million, including most recently, of course, Perth Theatre. So Creative Scotland, again, can't make any commitments in terms of the outcome of Perth Theatre and Concert Hall's application, but they understood the drivers for the review. Again, they're seeing, I think, not dissimilar challenges across the country, and helpful, I think they felt, for Chris Glasgow at Perth Theatre and Concert Hall and his colleagues to spell out how the review is being implemented as they develop and submit stage 2 of their multi-year funding application.
Okay, thank you. ICT.
In terms of risks and opportunities around developing the Alio models.
Sorry, I got carried away there, Councillor Welch. Risk, ICT risk, I mean, we've not looked at that in detail in the context of this review. I think the general principle is the same, however, as it is for finance, really. And, the complexities around risk for ICT, we all understand. It is an issue that we ask the ALIOs to give us data and evidence on as part of the annual governance statement, just how they're preparing for cybersecurity attacks, etc., etc. So I think the same general principle about how do we make sure we've got a really strong overall oversight of that risk and we're managing it appropriately. They are complex businesses, LAL and Perth Theatre and Concert Hall in particular have got big commercial operations. They're taking card transactions online, etc., etc. So it is an area that we want to look at in more detail as part of the next steps. Councillor Welsh.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to invite Leader of the Council to move the report.
Thanks, Provost. And thanks, Fiona and Glasgow Audit for bringing this report. I'm afraid I think it's been too long in coming. I'm finally glad to see that we are looking at things moving forward, where this review and its recommendations reflect the much wider and significant change process which we in the Council itself are having to do. And we should expect it and look at ways of being able to consolidate key support functions within the ALIOs, as we're doing with similar functions in the councils, to secure frontline provision for customers and audiences, which is the key part of this whole process. I also recognise the challenges around properties, many of which have been used and loved over the decades, but none of which have infinite lifespans. We continue to invest in our culture and sport buildings, including over 55 million recently in the new Perth Museum and Blairgowrie Recreation Centre. We must ensure our assets overall are affordable, sustainable and working well for the communities. I would like again to thank Fiona and officers for bringing this report. I think it's quite clear what we should be doing as elected members. And I could go on, but I don't want to keep you from your lunch.
I'd like to invite the Deputy Leader to second the paper.
Thank you, Provost. And again, I'd just like to echo the leader's comments there and thanking Fiona Robertson not only for her presentation but for the diligent way and passionate way in which she has responded to the questions that have been asked this morning. Also to the Chief Executive for his input, and also to Duncan Black from Glasgow Audit for his valued input also. In 23-24, over 8.7 million of public money is being invested by this council in these three arm's length external organisations in order to deliver important services in line with this council's agreed corporate priorities. It is imperative that Perth and Kinross Council strives to continue and indeed improve where possible on delivery of these public-facing services in the years ahead. In this regard, in what is obviously an extremely challenging financial environment for local authorities and indeed for both the Scottish and UK governments, it is incumbent on elected members and officers to work together so that PKC is organised to deliver for the residents of Perth and Kinross, and to do so at best value for the public pound. This paper clearly sets out sensible and well-considered recommendations of officers, informed by the welcome and diligent independent advice of Glasgow Audit, and also by some extremely helpful input from the boards and CEOs of Live Active Leisure, Culture Perth and Kinross, and Perth Theatre and Concert Hall. Provost, I'm very happy to second the motion to allow the stated priority actions to be progressed following the Christmas and New Year recess, and for ongoing work to be undertaken going forward through 2024 and beyond. We have always said that we will not shirk difficult decisions. These are difficult decisions, but we are duty bound to take heed of the internal and independent advice we have received and make progress without unnecessary delay. Happy to second.
Thank you very much, Deputy Leader. Members, we've had a request for a recess, and given the time, I'm minded just to break for lunch at this point, and that provides an actual recess as well. And therefore, we will resume at 2:30 in 1 hour. Okay, thank you.